Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 172.
172.
Ooh. I hear silence. Actually, yes.
That didn't go with my normal tonality. That almost went with like a correction.
Oh,
right?
You're snarky right
yeah,
now.
Yeah, I am.
Ooh.
I was off last week, and so yeah, I got a little pent up, stuff to get out.
Okay.
So.
Well, as you can see, it's a different crew here again today. We're glad that you're joining with us. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at the church that sponsors this podcast. And this is the podcast where we're going to chase the truth wherever it runs, which means we start with a sermon from last week, and then we kind of take our cue from there and start exploring various topics and ideas, even some of the questions that you guys send us and comments that you make on the YouTube channel or wherever in the hallways. And we're just glad you're joining with us. Hopefully you enjoy this for the first 4 minutes, because apparently some people don't. But anyway, how's it going over there? Why don't you say hi, Brent?
Hi, Brent. And the reason we get feedback sometimes that people say we waste the first 4 minutes is because that's usually where we're goofing around, telling jokes, having fun, and and it's really mostly because we're all friends. We don't see each other all day. Then we come in here and it's playtime. Woohoo! So, but my name is Brent Branchot, and I know if Stephen was here, he would tell you that to let us know what platform you listen to or watch. Is it YouTube or Spotify or what's the other one? Spotify,
YouTube, Apple,
and just let us know where you listen to and like it and subscribe to it so that it will move the algorithms. My name is Brent, and like I said, I'm the Connections pastor here, and so I just want to let you know we love reading your comments. We love discussing your questions, and they don't have to be on topic. They can be any life issue. They can be any theological issue, and we'll do our best to address them.
As we have one today.
We do. We have, I think, two things to hit on today, and both of them are very emotionally charged. So it is a very difficult conversation, probably, for people to hear. It is definitely packed with emotion. So those will be difficult topics to kind of discuss. But so grant us grace and objectivity as you're listening to some of the things that we state and everything else. So we don't want to offend it. But one of them, and this would have been Stephen's section here, is first impressions. And his was basically talking, there was a comment from the sermon this past weekend or I guess the rabbit trail from last week, which is a sermon 2 weeks ago. And the sermon was talking about divorce. And so you have the question.
I got a comment right here. So they asked this, and this is, again, kind of we had some good comments. We had some just people trying to give advice and care about each other online, because divorce is a very sensitive topic, and me and Stephen were very blunt about it, so it's kind of rough. But
yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet.
But the question that this person asked is, how do I maintain a Christ and more biblical-centered foundation for my daughter in the wake of my wife's adultery and decision to divorce me while not trashing her? So it sounds like biblical divorce. She hadn't divorced him. Obviously, he's hurt. He's got a daughter, feeling like, oh, what do I say? How do I not trash her? Do I simply tell my daughter things didn't work out, but that God expects us to maintain a lifelong covenant with our spouse? How do I answer the question of, why are you and mommy divorced and not living together? How do I answer that in a godly way? So that's a comment.
I mean, I would start off just saying that, depending on the age of your daughter, I thought what you said was pretty good. That, the talking about the covenant being a lifetime covenant. But I would say when it's coming down to shifting blame or, dredging up secrets, I would say that is very much probably a age-appropriate discussion. If your daughter's 5 years old, you don't talk about certain things, and talking about adultery probably is not going to be the healthiest thing for her. She probably wouldn't even fully understand what that means, and so as they mature, as they grow up, I mean, I think think the truth is important, but it's also important how you present it.
So, yeah, I think if your daughter is young right now, in order to not, and I don't think it helps to trash people. Obviously, she has made her decisions. It's hurt both of you deeply. I think you can acknowledge the pain. I think you can acknowledge the sorrow. I think you say it makes daddy sad too. This is not what I wanted for you. I love you. You can, again, fixate on how your daughter feels. But second, I take this from an illustration given by Corrie ten Boom's father, as they were on a train, and she was asking some very difficult questions about, like, I think sex and some different things, and the dad said, "Well, come here," and she came over, and he said, "Would you please take my suitcase and put it in the other way?" And she pulled and pulled and pulled. She couldn't even lift it. She was so little. And he's like, "No, I've got the suitcase." Picks it up and says, "Just like that question, it's too much for you to carry right now. One day you'll be strong enough to carry it, but right now I need you to trust me. I can carry the suitcase, but you can't." And so just using that illustration as a way of saying, hey, one day I'll be able to tell you everything, but right now I just need to let you know. I know it hurts and I love you, but it's too heavy. You can't carry it. I can carry it right now, but I can't put that on you. I think that's an appropriate way to begin that conversation until the day at which you are deeming like, I think it's time for her to know, for safety reasons, for whatever it is. There are going to be those moments in which you're going to make that decision. And you don't have to disparage that marriage is supposed to be in its ideal form for a lifetime covenant. But because of human sin, and you can mention human sin breaks things, and we make decisions that break things. And so you can mention these kinds of looser terms as they get older until it becomes more specific. And so I think that if you're struggling with your feelings towards your spouse, you do not vent, or your ex-spouse, you do not vent them to your children. Mm-mm. You need a community, you need a pastor, you need a small group, you need some other group of men around you that you can vent to. Not females, you need another another male to vent to. And so you need to start opening that up. And let them be godly men, because they'll tell you, hey man, you're going too far. That is trashing where you don't need to be trashing, because we don't want to mistreat people made in the image of God even when they've sinned. But we also don't want to pretend like their sin didn't do anything or that it's not there.
Yeah. And I would say a couple of things, too. We did say that truth is important, and we did talk about maybe the truth coming out at some other point. But also, the truth doesn't have to come out, necessarily. A lot of times, you're giving information to your children as a benefit to them and not a burden to them. I mean, one of the things that I used to tell my kids when they were small and, they were growing up, and they would ask questions, Dad, did you ever do drugs, before and when you were younger? Dad, did you and Mom fool around before you were married? Dad, did you? And I would always tell them, I'm not going to answer those questions. I'm not going to tell you all of my foibles and everything else. I'm not your friend. I'm your parent, right? So I'm not going to share with you all my deep, dark secrets. But if it is appropriate to share those things with you, like you're heading down that path, or I see signs, I might open up some of those things to you, and share with you, so that it will come as a warning or a benefit to you, in your journey, and not just. And part of the reason I developed that, and not everybody would agree with that mentality, but one of the reasons I did it was because my dad dropped out of school in the 9th grade. And we all knew that. And so when I got into high school, I didn't care about school. I was, and my dad education's important. You need to work hard. You need to get a diploma. You need to do this, so that you can get a good job. And my thought was, okay, look, you drive 2 really nice cars, not really nice cars, but, you drive nice cars. You got a nice house. You got a good family. You don't need education. So I didn't put any value in it. And I just thought, it worked for you, and life turned out good for you. So I could do these things that you're calling a mistake, and my life will turn out fine. And I realized as I was growing up, I don't want my kids to have that in the back of their head, is I could do drugs and my life will turn out okay. I could do these things and my life will turn out okay, because sometimes they don't. So part of it was, there'll come a time when you're an adult, you got your own family, and then you want to ask me all those secrets, I'm happy to share them with you. I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, so we're the opposite on the family scale on that. Like, we told all the stories, like, and some of it was not because we wanted them to think that it's permissive. We actually told the consequences of the story as well. So it wasn't just, yeah, we did this, but here's what happened. And here's where it's led into my life. And here's the things that I'm still wrestling with now. It's not something that goes away. Don't make, as Bill Getty in our church said, don't make stupid decisions that the 72-year-old has to live with from the 14-year-old. And so for us, we always felt like there's two things that it helps us is that, one, we want them to know each other. We want them to know us. We wanted to build intimacy. And so truth built intimacy, especially when we were honest about the consequences and the current struggles that it created in our lives. And so those two things helped us at least to help them see these are consequences that are more serious. And and then we'd start pointing out some of the patterns in them and then their friends or things like that, and just be like, oh, look, I think that's going in a bad direction because this is how I did it. And it's like, and never have maybe they're just not as smart as you, and they're just like, oh, well, you turned out okay. And because we've always said, well, I wasn't going to turn out okay. The only thing that turned me out okay was Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so that was the big shift for us. So,
and I did share things like that. Like, I didn't finish high school when I was supposed to finish high school. And one of the things I told them was, listen, here's the difference between taking education seriously and not is if you take education seriously, you graduate high school, you go to college and get your degrees, you get to do what you want to do. When you don't, you have to do what you have to do, and there's a big difference. And so if you want to do that, this is the consequences.
Or you went up on a podcast with a couple of people who've done a lot of school and don't. Yeah. But sit with the guy in the podcast, listen to him give advice. That's great.
So, but again, I would just say too, when it comes time to where you're thinking like maybe this is the time to talk to your daughter about these things, always check your reasoning of letting them know,
and try to look at your daughter's heart. Like, is she trying to get permission for something? Like, you'll know.
Yeah, and again, just never, even at this stage, I don't know how old your daughter is. I don't know if it's sad, but if she's young, one of the things I think is really unhealthy in divorces is when one partner plays the victim, and so the child has to feel like they need to protect or side with one and not the other. And then it just creates this imbalance of being able to love your parents freely, mm-hmm. and you always feel restrained in your love and your expression of your love for your parents. And I think that creates unhealth in relationships. So, all right. So I hope we answered that significantly, but it is a difficult thing, and we're sorry to hear about that, and we pray for your family. So,
amen.
All right, so getting into the thing, but first I just got back from vacation. So
yeah, how was it?
It was good. I mean, it was really, really relaxing, which was really nice. Just part of it was everybody at the church was on vacation,
so nobody bugged you.
Yeah, there was no emails, phone calls, text messages.
Yeah, we were being bugged.
I
was here being. Just kidding.
It was, but it was just so relaxing. We went up to spend time with my daughter and grandkids, and just got to play with them and take naps, and then we brought them home for 2.5 weeks. So our house is full.
Fun's over.
It's fun, fun. But as you know, it is
relaxation's over.
Yeah, it is. My daughter texted me yesterday, Alyssa, and she's, how are my babies doing? I said, they're doing great, but I'm getting over this bickering with them about everything. But she's like, yeah, that's the thing I miss the least right now. But it's been great. And so yesterday, I went over to Walmart, grabbed some stuff for lunch, and then went into the break room and was eating my lunch. And the manager came in and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm on break." She's like, "You don't work here." I said, "Hey, I use self-checkout, so technically I do."
Why would you want to go eat lunch in the Walmart break room?
I don't know. I saw that. I thought it was funny.
That was pretty funny.
All right. So again, this is episode 172. It's covered in dust. and just talking about following Jesus so closely, we're getting his dust on us. And the subtitle on this was "Like a Child." Come to me like a child. So, you were talking about this passage that talked about Jesus saying, "Bring the children to me," because they were trying to keep the kids away. And he's like, "Bring them to me," and
Don't
just
hold
like,
them back.
yeah, and just like, come to me as a child. And one of the things I think is important as we're getting into what it means to come to Jesus as a child. But, one of the reminders I always think about when I think about this generation that is coming up is, I've heard this said before, and it's kind of a scary thought, when if we're not being diligent about it, if we're not, teaching our kids to know Christ and all that stuff is, the church is one generation from extinction.
It is, yes, always.
And I mean, you look over like the last 20, 40 years, church attendance has significantly dropped. Faithlessness in our country has considerably dropped. Wickedness has risen, and it is so important to capture the child's heart, capture their imagination, and teach them to know Jesus. And you talked about, we do child dedications, in our church, and that's kind of one of the commitments parents make is to raise their children to know Christ, and we as a church commit to them to come alongside them and help them. And so just as we're thinking about that too, just are we really investing in our children to come to know the Lord? And we'll probably get into some topics like, should we force our kids to go to church as they get a little older and they don't want to go to church, or stuff like that. But
it is a big deal. Like, I was looking up some of the statistics as it kind of works in the in history, and the bottom line is that it's the millennial generation. So the boomers obviously went to church a lot, brought their kids. Gen Xers kind of stopped going here and there.
So what you're saying is I'm better than you.
Sure.
Okay. No, I want you to say those words.
Actually, no, you're not, because you guys are the parents of the millennials as well, and you're the parents, and so you guys didn't train us. You didn't pass the faith on well enough. So, we're not the parents of the Xers, or the Xers aren't the parents of the millennials. We barely get any. We don't have kids. No, so it's like, and the millennials don't take their kids at all. It's the Zers that are seeing a revival right now. It's this Gen Z, Gen Alpha generation that's been raised in all of the kind of secularness, and they're going like, we're done with this. This is worthless. Like, what is wrong with you people with your phones out and stuff? Like, we're the natives and we don't like it. And so they're fascinated by the church. They're coming back to the church in droves. At least the men are, the boys. So that's very interesting. So what's fascinating is also in the statistics is that, like, mom can bring the kid to church and the son or daughter will likely stay in the church, and it's a certain percentage. And then dad comes and suddenly it's much, much higher. It's like most of the time they actually end up staying. So it's kind of these interesting stats that exist.
That's one of the things doing marriage counseling at the church a lot, and talking to couples. And I will say, and I mean, there's a lot of things around it, but a lot of times it's the woman who seems to have a more significant relationship with God, and the husband is kind of aloof, and we'll sit and talk to them, about their family, and she wants him to be the spiritual leader, and he doesn't have any interest in that, and so I always go, well, who's the spiritual leader of your house? And they'll go, well, she is, and one of the things I always point out is, and I do believe this, men are the leaders of their family, men are responsible for their families, and I always tell them, no, she's not, you are, sir. The question is, where are you leading your family spiritually?
Right.
And I think that statistic you brought up really confirms that, because I don't remember the exact percentages, but it was like,
I just pulled them up there. 67% to 75% of kids will stay in the faith if both their parents are going.
Okay.
Father only, it's 55 to 75%.
Right.
And then mother only, it's 15 to 25%.
Okay. So it's worse than I thought, because I thought it was 20 and 40. But yeah, like 15 to 20, if the woman has the significant relationship with God, they see her reading her Bible and praying, and she's taking them to church, and dad's not really involved in their spiritual life. And then it goes up to over 50% when it's the husband, and it doesn't matter what the wife's situation is. But if they're both committed, then it's 75%. So
yeah, the difficulties also in these kinds of studies, though, is that there's a lot of evidence right now that there's two groups of men as well in the church. There's one group that's like out for, like, you know, they love the Lord, they're reading their Bibles, they're they're at church, they're kind of repentant, they're trying to serve their families and their wives, and then there's another group that goes to church and uses it to like push down, point, it's a toxic almost kind of form masculinity. Nancy Pearcey does a really good job of kind of pulling these out. And so if you have a father and mother both who are dedicated in a serious manner, the percentages go way, way up in your marriage staying together, in your kids taking on the faith. It's in that two-toned home that regardless, it's going to go way down.
Yeah. And I mean, and I would imagine too that, those that go to church but don't live out their faith at home, the percentages probably aren't very good.
Yeah, so here's the crazy thing, right? So the percentages of people going to church and their kids staying, it goes up. If neither parent goes to church, it's less than 10%. So you can have people who literally love Jesus at home and read the Bible to their kids but don't go to church. You have a less than 10% chance of your kids staying in the faith. Like, there is something about the gathering of church believers that's necessary in the generation of the faith. Why? You see, because here's a few reasons. You can do it at home all you want. And guess what? That's mom and dad's faith. It's mom and dad's faith. Mom and dad's faith. And in fact, it can become a twisted faith where it's their viewpoints, their way. You become like the pope of the family. When you go to a church, contrary to popular belief, you don't you don't believe everything the pastor says. Trust me, they don't believe everything I say. In fact, they're like the internet. People have pushback. They ignored this. They don't like that. But also, as a child, you're getting to hear other feedback. Your parents have friends at the church, and they think a little differently about things. They live life. You're getting a broader exposure of the Christian life, which is one of the reasons why in certain really healthy megachurches, you have really flourishing families. I'm not going to say all the megachurches. There are really flourishing families in smaller churches where the community is thick. And that is a very potent piece to it. And so, because I grew up in the youth ministry era where we were doing youth ministry together. And man, we had parents and kids who were like, I don't have to commit myself to a church. Like, I'm part of the kingdom of God. I'm part of all the churches. I'll go here one day and I'll go here one day. That inconsistency is difficult too. It doesn't actually help in the journey. So, because there is something about that commitment to that community, to that vision, and that direction, that causes the child to feel a sense of safety, and then you can learn. You can't learn in a chaotic environment. It's not actually good for the child.
And I think the most effective communities that you could be involved in, there's a loyalty involved, right? So if you're not loyal to the community's not really going to be loyal to you, in that sense, because I think loyalty comes from knowing somebody, knowing their situations and caring for them through that, where if you're not really involved in somebody's life, you're not necessarily sure of their motives as well. And you're not sure how you can help them, So I think if you just are fluttering from church to church, community to community, and not really being invested, then there is a disconnect in that community. And a lot of times you want that community when you need them, but you weren't around, for them to really develop that loyalty and intimacy of relationship with you as well.
So the other error, right, is then that you only bring your kids to church, and you relegate all of the training over to the church, so that you're not doing what Deuteronomy says. What the scripture we were reading says, that these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. And this is, this is called saturating them, putting the Word of God in their life and the presence of God and the conversations about God in everything that you do, from the movies that you watch to the music that you listen to the drives that you go on, to how you're acting. And like, yeah, guess what? My kids yell at other drivers because they learn to yell at other drivers from me. Sometimes I'm like, no, we need to bless them. It's like, there's all these aspects to learning about how to care for people that happen, and not just at church, but in the everyday. And so while you can get the theory and the practice at church, you're supposed to live it out in the home. And these two things come together, and they create the most dynamic reality for a child to really take in. So when I think of Jesus saying, bring them to me, I think he's telling parents, you bring them to me. Now, where is Jesus found? He's found in his community. We are the body of Christ. You can't really not take them to Jesus and not bring them to the body of Christ. That's just not something you can do. And so I'm kind of sad at the level of which Americans have come to think about the church, in the sense of like, oh, it's a building, it's a time of the day. No, it's a community. It is an active embodiment of Christ on earth. And if you're going to bring your children Christ, you've got to have it be the community, actual like legitimate community of Christ. And all the data experts are saying, like that do like sticky teams or sticky church and stuff like this, that are sticky faith. Sorry, it was like Fuller Institute youth stuff and things like. They're like, no, consistency at the same church through your child's life is one of the most necessary pieces for them to really understand the faith and make a decision for Christ.
And one of the things that you brought up is you were talking about the rich young ruler, and Jesus talked to him, and just said, I can't think of it offhand, but basically, why do you think you should go to heaven or whatever? And he's like,
how do
I've done everything right.
He's got it all good.
Yeah, all good. And he made the point that, you can't do enough good to earn eternal life, right?
Yeah.
And it's about dependency, right? Following and dependency. And going back to the child motif, one of the things that's so important, I think, in raising your children to know Christ in a real way is the fact that when we're children, we are just completely committed, right? We're dependent on our parents. We trust our parents implicitly. We don't question our parents.
This trust psychology out there says that you are born a trusting being.
Yeah,
because you have to. You trust your mom implicitly to feed you.
Right.
So it's like this is the natural state is to trust. The natural state of a child is to lean into that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, so as a child, your dad is your hero for the most part. You absolutely trust them to take care of you, that your needs will be met. You don't really question them at this point. And one of the things that as we raise our children, and there's the adage in Scripture that says, train your children in the way they should go, and when they grow up, they won't depart from it. It doesn't mean they won't, but that's the general rule that, even if they go off and explore, because as a child, right, my dad was my hero, my parents were great, smartest people in the world, my dad knew everything. Then you're getting 13, 14, 15, 16. You're trying to kind of create your own individuality, I think, in your family, especially as a guy. You start challenging your dad, and I don't necessarily mean you're challenging to a fight, but you're challenging him being right. You're trying to create some sort of a equalness or dominance, to establish yourself, and that breaks down. And then as you get older, you return to that. My dad is the greatest guy in the world. He's my hero again, and I can come to him for everything. And so, again, as a child, knowing Christ, and sometimes as a teen, you kind of wander a little bit and then come back to it, hopefully in that. And I think that's what it means by really being dependent on Christ. We see flaws in our parents. There is no flaw in Christ. So if you stay connected with Christ, you're never going to get to that point where you start pointing out flaws and irregularities. But as a child, I saw this on something, and it was like, this is so true. Somebody was saying, I loved being a child. I had a fully furnished home. I had a personal chef. I had a maid. I had a personal driver, all the time. And it's just like childhood is the best.
I didn't even have to buckle myself in.
I didn't have to go leave the house in the morning and work all day to pay for this stuff. It was all just,
In fact, when my parents were mad, they said, go outside and play.
Oh, yeah. Now it was punishment to stay inside.
Yeah.
Now it's punishment to go outside.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. And that's, you do. And here's the thing. You do have all of those things in many ways in your Father in heaven. And that's what Jesus is getting at. It's like, just as you were dependent on your dad or your parents when you were a kid, you're dependent upon God in this way. I think this is the most pernicious lie that the enemy has foisted on Americans, that we are independent. I am dependent all by myself, right? There is this, I don't need anybody. And it's like, you can't even make yourself, you can't stop time. You're actually dependent on time. You actually can't make yourself not exist. You can't pop in and out of existence. You can't, there's a lot of things that you can't do, and you're dependent. You're dependent on your heart beating. You're dependent on your brain making sure that your circulatory and your breathing is going on. You're dependent on the fact that you need food. And guess what? You've got to go get that food, but you're dependent on it. You're also dependent on the atomic structures of the very levels of quarks popping in and out of various places. There's so much dependency that we have on existence itself. And then God's got to keep it all existing. God's got to keep all your cell phone working and all the rules and the laws that he laid out from the beginning of creation. He's got to be faithful in all those things. You're dependent upon God being trustworthy. You're dependent upon God being faithful to his word. You're dependent upon him really smart, that he's thought everything for you so you can survive. You got to be dependent upon him just wanting you to exist, because if he didn't want you here, he could just rewrite it all. We could have had a third co-host on this show. It'd been weird if we did.
Yeah. And if God blinks, it all goes away. Yeah.
It's there's just this reality that what Jesus is almost doing is taking you back to basics. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. You are not God. Money's not God. Power is not God. Honor is not God. And neither is pleasure. These things are not God. You can only depend on one, the one that you were made to depend on. You're made in his image. Images are dependent. Think about this. The image in your mirror is dependent on you being there. That's why it's freaky in horror movies when the mirror starts doing things that you're not doing. It's that's not how that's supposed to go.
Right.
Because it's dependent on you. So that's the picture. We're the image. We're dependent upon him. And it's just that level of just dependency is so critical if we're going to live the Christian life correctly.
Now, you had mentioned those 4 things. That was that book you mentioned by Arthur Brooks, right?
My wife, Tressa, sent me a podcast where Arthur Brooks was being interviewed, and he was pointing back to Thomas Aquinas. Now, Thomas Aquinas is considered the doctor of the Catholic Church. He was a theologian in the Western Church, would be the Roman Catholic Church at the time. And he was the guy who basically brought all of Aristotle's thinking in line with the biblical standards. He wrote this giant tome called Summa Theologica. In there, he lays out 4 disordered loves, which are actually found in this section of Mark. In fact, you think about it, honor, the guys are like, I want to sit at the right hand or the left hand. Or power, hey, stop that guy from casting out demons. And do you have, why couldn't we cast him out? It's not in power in you. You got to depend upon me. Pleasure, if your right hand causes you sin, fling it off, throw it away. Don't divorce because you want to. No, that's not you trust in God, faithful. And then riches with the rich young ruler. All 4 of those are found in this section as very clear motifs that you're in each one saying, no, you need to be dependent on God. No, you need to be dependent on God. All these other things will make it seem like you're good because you won't suffer. But in the end, you will suffer. The ultimate suffering. Yeah, money can keep you comfortable, but not forever. Honor can give you comfort, but not forever. Pleasure can make it feel good, but not forever. And if you think in those terms, you're like, oh, whoa. Jesus is kind of saying like, sure, you can have these. You can have comfort for a little bit. But in the end, power will go away. Fame will go away. Pleasure will go away. And riches will go away. They can't save you. And it's just, that's so huge if you think about it in those terms.
Yeah, you were talking about that, and it just reminded me of a quote I heard not too long ago, and I thought it was pretty profound. And it was, sin will take you places you don't want to go, keep you there longer than you want to stay, and take more from you than it promised. And it's just like, that is so true, you know? And yeah, so I mean, like any of these things, you know, temporary, and it will destroy you in the end. So, so one of the things too you talked about was, you know, the dependence and all that. I wrote down, it's not about heaven and hell, but destination of relationship. And I'm telling you, the thing that drives me crazy is when I'm writing these notes, it's clear to me what I want to say about it. Yeah, and then when I look at it, I go,
I have no idea.
What is the it's? It's not about heaven and hell.
So I was talking about the idea that in our church, I'm trying to help us get back to the gospel isn't about getting a ticket to go to heaven.
Okay.
And it's not about missing out on a ticket and God punishing you to hell. Oh, yeah. Look, there is punishment that comes with hell because the punishment is for the bad things that we did. We're punished because we've done bad things. That's what a good judge does.
It's just.
It's just. We all want justice. Trust me, we're all standing in streets protesting for justice. So justice is something humans want. The problem is God offers forgiveness when you've acknowledged you deserve justice, right? So, and well, who have we broken the law to? It's not a law. And this was another weird thing about American culture. We wrote a constitution. We created these laws that are separate from people. Like this is unknown in the ancient world. This is unknown. Like Hammurabi's code, you know, this law code was all about the gods, right? It was all about Hammurabi. This is the king's code. You're denying the king. In England to this day, they don't have a written constitution. They don't have a written law code. It's a tradition of law that they know and they learn. And so it's obviously written down somewhere, but it's ultimately established in the king. This is the king's law. This is the same thing in any of these places. This is the king's law. A separate law is a modern invention. And so when we think of the rules, and I broke the rules, well, so it's like, you're being mean to me. No, he's the king. He is the law. This is a relationship. You're breaking him. You're breaking relationship with him. You're thumbing your nose and you're flipping off God when you break his rules. So it's a relational thing. So even when I was talking about the kingdom of God, I was saying, like, I don't like that word kingdom, right? I was like castles and knights and stuff. I'm like, because it's about an ever-present relationship with the one who is the leader. It's like the rule doesn't exist if you're not in a relationship with him. You can't actually be under the laws of a king you're not the subject of. And that's why you're a subject of the king. Well, you're beholden to his laws. And he's supposed to care for you as the subject. And so there's this relationship that's very different than the way we think of it with laws and rules and stuff like that.
And we put a lot of emphasis on ourselves, and I think you kind of brought this up, but we put a lot of emphasis on ourselves and what we do. And, you know, you said it's not about what we do, it's about what he has done, you know? Mm-hmm. And it just made me think, yeah, it's not about what we do. Now, here's the epic part about God. It's not what we do, it's what he's dun, dun, dun.
Brent and his terrible jokes.
Yeah, these are moaners.
They just keep coming. They just keep coming.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not good, but so there was something else I wanted to say. Let me see. This is really bad radio here, but
yeah, bad radio. But anyway, we were going to talk about those four different dependencies a little bit, and I was just curious, like, which one of those four did you find yourself like looking at and going like, oh man, yeah, that's the one I struggle with the most.
I really think that probably the thing I struggle with the most is pleasure, you know? And
Speaking from vacation. Just kidding.
I enjoy going on vacations, you know, and here's the thing, right? The thing that is probably your weakness, you know, it can be a weakness, it could be a strength, you know, and it's just how it's ordered,
Right,
you know? And so you can always make excuses for the weak part of it by focusing on the strong part of it, right? So, you know, like I love to go on vacations. Part of me says vacations with Nancy and my busy, crazy schedules, that's where we really get a chance to get away, you know, unplug and just pour into each other. And, you know, so we really enjoy vacations where we're catered to and pampered, you know, and not having to take on a lot of responsibility. It's kind of like, this is a responsibility-free week, you know, and we could just really just focus on us. And I feel like it just fills our cup to come back. But also, you know, when it comes to pleasure, you know, I'm diabetic and it's so hard for me not to eat right. You know, I love sweets. I love ice cream. And so I don't take care of my diabetes as well as I should. And part of that is just giving into pleasure. And I was just listening to a sermon or a talk talking about, you know, health and all this stuff. And it was talking about eating and the fact that we are so disordered in our eating, you know, that it's really about sustenance. Yep. And we want to make it about things other than sustenance, you know? And
so, I mean, I might push back a little bit on that because you can, like, I was listening to, like, I don't want to, like, there's this conversation about purity culture and stuff like that. And oftentimes purity culture was misused and hurt people. And I know that. And their main aim was like, look, sex only belongs in a marriage. Don't have it until you're married. Everything else, you're bad. You're ruined. You're this, you're that. Now, take another pleasure. Food. Food's not about pleasure. Food is only for sustenance. Don't you dare eat food for pleasure. And yeah, here's the problem. Like, there are certain organs on the female body only designed for pleasure in sex. There are taste buds in your mouth that are designed strictly to taste flavors and give you pleasure from the food. Like, God put those there. So the question isn't whether that's why I like that it's a disordered good. It's good to have pleasure.
Right.
It's good to go on a Sabbath and have a break and vacation, whatever, vacate. We've had that conversation. But it's when it's ultimate and it starts to take over to where it's starting to interrupt your ability to share the gospel because you don't want to do something uncomfortable, where you're not willing to go serve somebody and take up a lot of time and sacrifice. We're going to have areas where we're struggling. Maybe it's food. I know for me, I've been yelling at myself because I can get into the food problem, not at the same level, but I'm a grazer. I don't know about you. Like, put me at a party and I'm just like, I go home like, I don't know what I ate, but I ate so much. And just like, and it was not, all of it was not good for me and just totally over it. It's probably why I'm exercising so much so I can continue to encourage my gluttony. You know, people don't think that exercisers can be gluttonous. Yeah. Some people exercise to allow themselves to be gluttonous, which is deceitful, right? So that's, anyway, it's why I think struggling with drug abuse and substance abuse and just an over-sensualization, like everything's got to be amazing. And one of the good things to ask yourself if you've really got this problem is, can you be bored?
I can be bored. And in fact, sometimes I enjoy being bored. You know,
turn it into a pleasure. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I just, you know, like in my house, there's always noise, you know, and Nancy's one of those people that doesn't necessarily watch TV as much as she wants it on for background noise. And to me, it's just like, don't you ever just want quiet? Don't you ever just want, you know, and to me, it's like sometimes you turn the TV off and there's nothing going, and it's just, you know, and Nancy and I are so weird because I am an extrovert and she is an introvert. She is very much an introvert, but she is very social. You know, I mean, we have an opening in our schedule. She wants to fill it. You know, I have an opening in our schedule, and I'm like, let's just stay home tonight and do nothing, and so we're
you're an antisocial extrovert and she's a social introvert.
But part of it is she works at home, and I get a lot of social stimulation, throughout the week, and so she's like ready to go, and I'm like ready to stop, and so. But
that'll change as retirement hits and fun things like that. But I hope. Now, here's my second question, though. So if pleasure was number one, which one would you say is number two? Power, honor, or money? Like, when we look at this, like, okay, controlling other people is one of those. Dominion in relationship, domination in relationships, climbing status. This is all power. Overconfidence or authoritarianism, spiritual or moral authority to control people. Or is it like, hey, you really want to be seen as good, or you people please? You don't really want to tell people bad things about them. You want your image to be okay. You don't want people to dislike you, and so you flatter and manipulate a little bit here and there. Because I don't think it's money for you, as far as I can tell.
See, I don't think it's money for me. Nancy might think that money is more important to me than I really believe it to be. I don't believe in wasting money, and stuff like that. And Nancy is very much into wasting money. No, she's very much into, overspending, giving, just overspending on the grandkids, doing, and so when I keep saying no, she takes that as, you're stingy, but I'm not. I feel like I'm pretty generous with my money. So I don't really think that money is an issue for me. And again, Nancy might not feel as strongly about that as I do. But I would think probably the number two would be honor. I do want to have a good reputation. I do want people to like me. I do want people to think I'm funny. I do want people to think that I, have something important to say, Well,
you'll even go, I know that there's times where I'm like, you shouldn't be doing this ministry thing right now, man. You need to go home. And you're like, no, we got to be here. It's like, because there's a sense in you that you're like, I don't want to misrepresent the pastorate or be a minister. I don't want to ask other people to do things I wouldn't want to do. I want to show them that I'm honorable. Do you think maybe even honor's a little higher than pleasure, or do you think those two are pretty hot guns, or you solid one?
If I was to look at my life, pleasure is my weakness.
Okay.
And and not pleasure in all areas, but definitely eating is one of those. I can be a glutton when it comes to certain things, like food and junk food. I mean, I would rather eat a bowl of peanut butter crap and crunch than having a healthy dinner,
Did you say peanut butter crap and crunch?
Cap'n Crunch.
Captain Crunch. Got it.
Yeah.
No. You don't like pleasure that much.
Yeah. So, not all people find that pleasurable. But I would eat junk food for...
You do you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There were times when Nancy would be gone, visiting the grandkids or something. I'd be home alone. I'm like, what do I want for dinner? I'm going to have a bowl of ice cream. That's my dinner tonight. And so eating unhealthy and eating things that are pleasurable. And it's not just finding pleasure in food where it's like, okay, I'm going to just, have a piece or two of candy. It's like, no, I'm going to eat the whole bag of candy. I'm going to eat the whole carton of, ice cream, in one or two sittings, And so it's not so much like I want to be gluttonous. It's like, I don't want this pleasure to end,
It just tastes so good.
Yeah, it tastes so good. It's like, and I did hear, I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger or something that said one time that, if you have more than a spoonful of ice cream, then you're being a glutton. You're basically, that one spoonful should have satisfied you, you should have enjoyed it and then been okay with it. And to go back and have another spoonful, that's gluttony, and obviously he's more fit than I am, so
maybe gluttonously so, huh? I think that the interesting thing is that when you're talking about Nancy and her, you're discussing the idea of, say, that maybe she'd think differently about money. It gets to that point that I was making, that money sits behind a lot of these things as like the empowerer of honor, or for some people I know they'll use their money, they'll buy people gifts and they'll do things because they want to look good, they want to be honored in I would be a bad person if I didn't buy you gifts or things like that. So the danger is, how are you using money? is money in and of itself the obsession, or is what money bringing you the problem? Which is why you can end up having a money problem as the major secondary, because it would make you lose the other thing. And so it's really in control. I know for me, pleasure and honor kind of running guns for me in a lot of ways. In fact, oftentimes the pleasure kicks in when the honor isn't kicked in. And so to think of like, now pleasure definitely probably takes the number one slot, because honestly, I don't like being honored. Like when people try to like, oh, you're the pastor, blah, blah. I'm just like, and that's part of my social introversion. You know, I'm an antisocial introvert. So it's like, I'm just kidding.
Let me ask you this, though. When somebody compliments you and honors you with words, right, and it makes you uncomfortable, do you feel like that's not your issue because you're uncomfortable with it? Or is it you're uncomfortable with being affirmed? Because like one of the things when Nancy and I went through the 5 love languages, right? Yeah. And so her gifts is really high for her, and it's really low for me. You know, mine's at 0 in gifts. I don't care.
That's why I don't get you anything.
Yeah, I know. It's Father's Day, I don't want anything. Birthday, I don't want anything. You know, and so I used to tell her that love language, you know, gifts are strong love language for you, and she never really believed it, because although she buys gifts for everybody, even like we'd be in a store and somebody she hasn't seen in 8 years, she sees something that's perfect for them. Yeah. I got to get this for so-and-so. And it's like, why, you know? But it was really uncomfortable for her to receive gifts from people. Mm-hmm. And I would always say, it's not meaning that it's not your love language. It's meaning that you're uncomfortable receiving love, you know? So when it comes to that honor part for you, is it more of a thing of accepting it?
No. Like, I can accept, like, Tress and I, when we worked through this, we both came to the agreement that we were like, oh, it's not that.
This is like a therapy session.
Right, that's kind of fun. It was for us, it was like, we're both high quality time, but guess what? I'm also high quality gift.
Yeah.
I'm also, meaning that it's the right gift. Like, it hits me when somebody's gotten a gift they've thought about, because I'm like, oh, that's coming from knowing me. Quality time isn't just spending time. It's like, no, he threw the quality word on there because it was about getting to know each other. Guess what? I like quality touch. Like when you give me a real hug because I'm hurting, man, I receive it. I'll take it. Like, thank you. If you give me quality words that are true, I'm in. I can receive that all day long. When you flatter me, I smell it like it's a dirty diaper, and it just like, I don't believe you believe it. I think you're saying words that you haven't thought through because you don't know me. And I get that might be coming from you, or it's coming from your assumption that you're going to make me like you. And if that's what's happening, you're not making me like you. In fact, you're dishonoring yourself in front of me. That's how strong the honor part is running in me. It's this, like, I don't even want to honor you if you're trying to honor me unnecessarily. That makes me feel gross, and you should feel gross because that was ridiculous. Like, that's pretty rude, but
you do that in the foyer on Sundays when they go, great sermon, Pastor. You're like, wait a minute. You're grossing me out right now.
I'm kidding. Never said it that way, but no, I've had to learn to just go, thank you, I appreciate that. And I'm trying to mean it. Like sometimes they'll just be like, sometimes it's just like, they'll tell me what hit them and how, and it's just like, that means so much. When they just give me the flat, oh, that was great. Great job, Pastor. It's like, okay, I don't know you. You didn't have to say that. When they do it every single week, the same person, which does not happen to me, by the way, that's when I'd be like, you're just trying to flatter me. If somebody's like up on me, like, oh my gosh, that was like, I heard hundreds of thousands of sermons and that was the best sermon I've ever heard. And, and I'm like, well, why? Yeah. I'm like, you're flattering me. Like, it's like that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, but I think honor for me is serious in that I have some pretty serious, like, people pleasing issues at times. And like, I can boast and be arrogant at my accomplishments, like, because it makes me feel good that I did something better than you. And so it's ugly, it's nasty, but it's definitely there. Like money, I'm like that guy who's like, I have money? Oh, cool. I got some money. Like, I'm literally the guy who goes in to buy myself something. I walk up to the front of the counter. I'm just about to check out and I go, I don't really need this. I'm the guy who leaves the thing right there and just walks out. I'm just like, I'm not going to go all the way back in, but I don't need it because I
leave it right there for these peasants to pick up after me and put it back.
And definitely power is like my opposite. That's my lowest. I'm a very averse to power to the point where I've had to learn to be comfortable exercising power because I'll just give it away. I'll just here, you do it. I don't want, and it's abdication at that point instead of being appropriately empowering people and things like that. So and it's probably because I was bullied so much as a kid and because I had so much bad interaction with people who were powerful that I just I just have a very strong aversion to power. So I'm definitely pleasure, honor, money, power. Like those would be the four for me in that order.
Yeah, mine would probably be pleasure, honor, probably money and power because power is not a thing for me. I don't feel like I have to wield power.
All these things you are saying are my favorite things too.
We are very much alike in that, we're both, and I don't know how much of it is, we're both very ADHD.
Yeah, no, we're just totally like,
I will say this.
We feel bad for everybody listening.
I was hugely ADHD growing up. Now, the H is hyperactivity, right? So I kind of lost the hyperactivity part as I've gotten older and lazier, but I am definitely ADD for sure. So that hasn't gone away.
I mean, I'm just DD at this point. I've got deficit and disorder.
Yeah,
but no attention left.
The idea behind all of these is that we are using them to depend on instead of depending on Christ
for comfort and eternal life. Yeah. It's literally this guy was told, "Let it all go. Come follow me."
Yeah.
Well, if Jesus is the one who gave it to you in the first place, you don't think he can't give it back?
Yeah.
And that's really the challenge. If I give up all my pleasures, do I not believe that Jesus has better ones for me? It says in the scriptures, "The right hand are pleasures forevermore." And so, I'm going to go through some discomfort. I'm going to go through some difficulty. But as you and I both know, you've said it many times, it's like the easy thing is not always the best thing, and the best things in the world are the hardest things to earn, kind of stuff. And what would we expect if this is truly eternal life, if it didn't come with difficulty, if it didn't come with struggle, and it was all comfortable? And this is what's dangerous about our current era is that we're so comfortable because we've got so much money and we've got so much pleasure and we've got so much power, and we got all four of these in our culture. And it's like, we could be fooling ourselves if that we're depending on Jesus, which is why we can call ourselves to give, and it's like crickets. Like people are just like, "Oh, you want me to give?" Well, you may have a thing there. You know what? Go serve people. Serve people. I should be in charge. This is my gift. I think we got a problem here. But, hey, why does nobody tell me I did a good job? Why am I never getting a thank you? Well, we might have an honor problem here. There's all these kind of little things that show up, and it's like, I'm just not getting fed here anymore. Well, we might have a pleasure problem here. All four of those are very easy to kind of dissect when we dive into kind of what's your beef with church? What's your beef with when we're instructed by Christ to get out there and evangelize? It's just not any fun. Just way too uncomfortable, too scared. People are going to think you know what? People think homosexuality is sinful in the church. Well, it's not. Well, why do you say that? Well, how are we supposed to reach people if we keep saying this kind of? I think you're people pleasing. You got an honor problem. And so, I may be uncomfortable with those kinds of very black and white statements, but that's where the Lord goes. And so if I follow him, I go with him. Now,
I stand with God. I stand with Scripture over standing with culture. And if one of them is going to accept me, I want it to be God.
And that becomes where the persecution kicks in, as we'll talk about this coming Sunday, and the map that Jesus is laying out in this section that's all about discipleship. We called it Covered in Dust because this is considered the discipleship section in the book of Mark and the Bible. They actually consider these sections the call and the way of discipleship. So
one of the things too is when we're looking at this rich young ruler passage, I think the motif that it's setting is that he was dependent on his money, right? Because it's like, you've done all these good things, so take all of your money, give it to the poor, your riches will be stored in heaven, come follow me. And he walked away sad, So part of it is like he was depending on his finances to get him through, rather than let him all go and being that vulnerable and following Christ. But also, I've always looked at it like, it sounds kind of like a delayed gratification thing too. Okay, take all your money and give it away, and it'll be stored for you at a later time. And for you to withdraw. And it's like, no, I want to withdraw it now.
So for you and me, it's not go sell all your money. I mean, that freaks me out to think, I have to give away all my money. But at the same time, I'm sort of like, well, Jesus told me to use this money for something. Like, I want to do that as best as I can. Do I have my excuses? Do I have my reasons? Yeah. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say no. Like, there are lines that I start to go like, Jesus, are you serious? You really want me to? And I'm like, look, there's a large breadth of information about money because it's a good in the Bible. It's just when it owns your heart, it's no longer good. So what does Jesus tell you and me in pleasure? Take up your cross. Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and fling it away. It's better for you to enter into, right? He's telling us, if you can't control a pleasure, you better cut it out of your life. If you're all about your pleasures, you're supposed to suffer. Take up your cross and suffer. And you're just like, oh, I don't like that. That's really hard. I really don't like that. If you have power, he's telling you,
be last.
You need to be last. Be a servant of all. You don't get to have all the servants. You get to be the servant. And if you have honor, he's telling you, be a kid. Be a child. Children don't have honor. You're just trying to get the honor from somewhere else. No, you be ashamed. Be ashamed. Don't be ashamed of my word. Be ashamed because you don't gain honor. So all of these are directly confronting.
Would you say there's a difference between honor and glory? Like,
No, they're ubiquitous concepts in that scripture.
So when it talks about honor, being your thing, give that honor to God and don't keep it for yourself.
And what will happen though? Jesus in 3 days will be raised. You'll gain glory. What happens in pleasures? You die and then you're raised to life eternal, right? You don't have any power. You serve, and then you're raised into the kingdom, and you're going to be one of these people who has rule, and you're part of you get the honor and the power and the pleasure and the financial aid, the provision of the kingdom.
And
it's
if you're
all delayed gratification.
And if you're depending on these things and basically allowing them to rule your life, give them away and follow me. And one of the things too, and I don't know if I said this on the air recently, but years ago, like probably 14 years ago, I was discipling this guy that had really kind of returned to the faith. He was an alcoholic. And during our discipleship, he was struggling with alcohol. And I believe he's sober and been living a sober, faithful life. But one of the things in one of the Bible studies that we were doing, and I just kind of went, okay, just explain to me, why do you turn to alcohol? Why do you, when do you drink? And it's kind of like some of the talks that we had, kind of really, what is it? What is the weakness that brings you there? What is the thing that you're trying to find there? And he was just like, I've got a stressful job. And so I drink just to kind of, bring some peace into my life. I drink when I'm happy and celebrating. I drink when I'm hurting and depressed. I drink when and I'm like, okay, so basically what you're saying is for every aspect of your life, really, you're turning to alcohol as your refuge, and so the Spirit says, come to me, and let me fulfill all those things for you. And the Spirit will bring you life. And these things will promise you, a fix, but it's going to destroy you.
Right.
And it's going to take everything away from you that you want. Yep. Your station in life, your family, and that's the difference between dependence on Christ and dependence on these four things.
You are taking refuge, right? Yeah. If you are taking refuge in your pleasures, you're taking refuge in your money, but the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous shall run to it and find help. Yeah. Like that's the text that I'm like, totally, like you nailed it. That's awesome.
All right. So I guess we should get into this question. This is going to be a hot topic discussion. And I copied it and I printed it out, but I forgot to print out the name of the person. And so they'll know who they are. So here's the question. And before we get into this discussion, I just want to preface it with this. If you're the one that wrote this letter and you're listening to this discussion right now, I can tell by the letter that your question is a very emotional situation, right? The situation you're in, the situation in general is very emotional based. And so again, we're going to lay out some facts. We're going to lay out some opposing views and some supporting views probably, because there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of complexity to this. There's a lot of layers of an onion to this as well. So again, when we are emotionally, it's hard to be objective to other real truths, and we take any truth as an assault. And so please, as you're listening to this and we're explaining some things, give us grace. And if you don't agree with us, because again, looking at this, I thought, this could be a very emotionally charged topic and discussion. So again, if you are angered or upset, come talk to us personally, because this is more of a discussion than just shooting it out there and giving you a,
I think, I again, also want to just reiterate that we love you. And as pastors, our goal is to help you think about these issues in a very nuanced and careful manner, because there's just so much there. And yet to continue to love appropriately like you want to. I think that it is clear that, as we'll get into, go ahead and start it. I think that'll be easier.
So the letter says this: my question to Olive Branch: what is the Christian community doing to care about those being persecuted? I have been attending Olive Branch for several years. I got baptized there. I don't stand for what this administration, not Olive Branch, I'm guessing that this is the political administration right now, Donald Trump, what his administration is doing in tearing families apart and treating the immigrant community like a bunch of criminals. This hits close to me and my family. Her dad served the community, worked hard, paid his taxes, followed the law, and his only mistake was coming to this country to have a better life. We are hurting, we're holding close to God, and still loving and praying over those that think differently and believe that maybe our fathers should be deported. I thought Leviticus 19:33 and 34 tells us not to mistreat the foreigner, but rather love them. I grew up learning this from my mother, may she rest in peace, and my father, to always love this country, most importantly, love all, and practice Jesus' love. It hurts me, and it's hurting a large community of believers that fear even speaking out to our pastors or our church leaders. What are our Christian leaders doing? All I see is silence, and some may be taking action. My generation is aching for all the hurt occurring in this world, and we feel helpless. So she wants to know what we're doing about it, and it sounds like she's kind of upset that Christian leaders are being silent on this issue as well.
Well, let's just start first, and I just I just want to clarify when it comes, as you get further into your Christian faith, you're going to discover that persecution doesn't mean for in the Christian realm, it means for your faith. And so when we think of a persecuted believer, they're being persecuted because they are Christians, not because of some other situation in their life. Scriptures very clearly, and I'm not saying that this is your father, but I'm saying that the scriptures indicate that if you're suffering for doing wrong, then you can't call that persecution. That First Peter makes that pretty clear. So when we talk about persecution, we're talking about Christians who are being persecuted. In that case, I would say Olive Branch has been doing. We've talked about Voice of the Martyrs and Open Doors. We support through even our missionaries, persecuted Christians who are living from very persecuted countries and overseas. Even our missionary groups are working with them on a regular basis. So but I'm guessing that you're meaning persecuted in the sense of people who are being harassed for being here through, well, I call them undocumented, call it they came in illegally, which means they didn't have a visa or they overstayed their visa. I know that can be harsh sounding, but I'm using it as a very technical term, meaning they have not followed the rules that the immigration has set out for through the country's laws to become a naturalized citizen. So in that case, there's that's first. And so I'm just, again, trying to be sensitive, but understand that I take words very, very seriously because words are how we communicate. And so I don't want to miscommunicate the term. So,
and one thing I want to point out too is when we're talking about biblical truths, then that is our stance. When we're talking about policies and procedures or whatever, some of the things we're going to say are true. It doesn't necessarily mean, wow, they get our full endorsement, because there's complications in any position like that. So,
yes. And that's where I wanted to go. Like the Christian community, first and foremost, I think the views of Christians for the administration are going to be mixed. I don't think that, first and foremost, I think if your opinion can be grounded for you to feel the way that you do about the administration. I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should love the administration or dislike the administration. I'm here to proclaim Jesus. He's the answer. Salvation does not come on Air Force One. It's not going to come from Washington, D.C. Salvation is not going to come from any political government on the planet. So I think that's, first of all, the Christian's beginning stance, is that we are about the kingdom of God and we trust in Jesus. Secondarily, I'm an American and I'm a Christian before I'm an American. And therefore, I would want to stand against anything America is not doing well. And therefore, I can see there are specific instances that I would agree that certain things aren't going on. But here's my problem right now is I don't know of those. I'm not informed on these particular issues right now. And I know that the ones I was informed on were shown to be false. And the way that we can listen to the administration and go, well, that's all propaganda. How am I supposed to know what's really going on? And so it would be very personal, and you probably have some very specific ways that you know what's going on. And so I will leave that to you in that adjudication. My biggest thing is that there's two aspects we need to be careful of. One is overgeneralization, which means that we take the evils of an individual and we apply that to the whole. Or second, we take a particular evils of a policy, and instead of addressing the policy, we end up addressing a group of people. And what you'll do there is you'll miss out on the ability to powerfully change something because you got to fixate on the policy that's wrong, not on the group of people who are enforcing or doing the policy. So I think that's another aspect we've got to be careful of, because here are the moral boundaries. Policy is messy. Policies in administrations and politics is a nasty, messy game. However, morality has a lot of lines, and this is why you'll find out how you apply the morality gets messy. So I'm just going to lay out some of the biblical concepts that are all behind this. Wherever you want to jump in, Brent, just as we're going. Okay. First one, as to morality, the biblical text is clear. All human beings are made in the image of God, right?
Right.
So, and that would include everyone who is here in the United States, be them whatever ethnicity they are, whether they're here through the channels of immigration that the government set up, whether they came across without those channels of immigration, whether they are in the government themselves, they're made in the image of God, whether they're ICE agents, they're made in the image of God. Everyone's accorded the same value. That I would agree with, where you were told.
I would even go further and say people all over the world, not just in America.
Right.
No, I'm totally kidding.
Good. But it's important because, love all and practice Jesus' love. That is critical. Now, that is the part we're supposed to love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength first. This is, again, love is not a good feeling. We need to clarify this. In the biblical terms, love is a willingness to sacrifice for the good. That's why you love the Lord God first.
And a fidelity. Right?
Yeah, and that's faithfulness, and a faithful love to God. We're going to love him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's everything we've got. It all belongs to God first. And so that means that our approach as a church to immigration, as I've said through many years, is that we should be welcoming the immigrant, whoever they are, and teaching them in the gospel and teaching them to obey the laws of their land. That is the rules the scriptures lay out. Gospel first, because the heart has to be changed. And then we live appropriately to what God's called us to do. So that's always been what we've said. We're like, bring them in, love them, care about them, right? And if they need a place, we'll get a place. We need help, we'll get them help. But we are trying to bring the gospel to bear. Any change you want to do on that?
No.
Okay. Now we get into a little bit more of like we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's the second part of that comes out of that. And so again, we're supposed to love first the church, then the broader community, because if that's how the gospel is set up. It's first to the brothers, love one another as I have loved you, Jesus says. Love your neighbors yourself, then love your enemies. You're not supposed to love them all at the same. You're not supposed to sacrifice your love for your brother in Christ and let them go suffering in order to give your enemy something that they need, and let your brother. So if you got two people who are starving, you love your brother first. I mean, that's just technically in the triage of morality how that works out. And that doesn't settle well with a lot of people. They'd be like, no, you're supposed to love the enemy first, not your brother. They're going to cry. They're going to heaven. Like, understandably, but why would somebody want to be a part of the family if we're not taking care of our own family?
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, just, like your own household, if you guys have a certain amount of income and you're taking care of your family and you have a heart for the homeless, you don't give to the homeless so much so that your kids now become homeless. Right.
Absolutely.
You take care of your family, and then, you can sacrifice some, but you don't sacrifice all, to care for someone outside of your family.
Right.
So yeah, part of it is.
And that can fall into conversations about immigration, because you can only take in so many people before you start causing problems. And people go, well, America's different. And this is where policy gets messed up, right? It gets messy. But in general, we understand that the sojourner is one of those people we're supposed to love. Leviticus 19:33 through 34. Did you have that?
1933. It just tells us not to mistreat the foreigner and rather love them. So I didn't have the scripture on there, but
yeah. So that is true. The text is actually laying out for Israel that they're not to play favorites towards those who are non-Israelites. They're not supposed to oppress them, change their weights, harm them, push them out, destroy them, kill them. And in fact, the whole picture of the person who was a foreigner or a sojourner was somebody who was coming likely as a refugee from their own homelands to live in Israel. And Israel was told to welcome refugees, just welcome them all, bring them in and assimilate them. And what's interesting is that Leviticus 19:33 through 34, which I had up a minute ago, I'll read it here in a second. Do you have any thoughts you want to throw in while I'm writing that up? Leviticus 19:33. Here we go.
Okay. Boom, 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 boom.
All right. When the stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you are strangers in the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. And so the call to Israel, and remember we're talking ancient Israelite texts, ancient Israelite culture, they were the ones who were claiming, hey, no, we're different than the world. We don't kick you out because you're some stranger and a foreigner. No, we welcome you in. And yet this is only one text. As I was reading it, you find out just in some of this, they viewed this sojourner, the word is ger, the ger, is somebody who was considered a proselyte. They're converting to Israel's way of living when they come in there. So, right? So in their world, this is a religious conversion. So remember, this is a religious state. This does not just mean, hey, come live amongst us and, hang out with us and celebrate our Independence Day. And no, this is legitimately like you have to convert. So they were expected to obey the Sabbath or they would kill them. They were expected to get circumcised or they couldn't do Passover. But they were invited to do Passover. They were expected to be included at the festival of the Great Day of Atonement. They were expected at the Feast of Booths. They were expected, they were forbidden to eat blood. They were forbidden to sacrifice to a foreign god. They were forbidden to actually do any of the sexual immorality that the Jews thought were wrong. So one of the things we have to do is we go like, we have to take the principles of these things. So if you look at this is actually a naturalization process that they expected. If you didn't follow their naturalization process in Israel, they kicked you out of the community.
And there was examples of this in the New Testament too, where I forgot which one it was, but one of the apostles rose up and chastised the church because they were favoring the Jews over the Greeks in the church.
Paul does that to Peter.
Yeah, okay. And he's saying, no, we can't show favoritism, but these were people that were in the temple and in the church. In the church. And so he was just saying, no, you can't treat them different because they're different,
And so then this is remember, I'm describing ancient Israel. This has nothing to do with American ways of doing naturalization. There's a whole process that's come about. I'm just telling you that there is a concept of naturalization in the Old Testament. And you're quoting a portion of that when you reference to Leviticus 19. The goal in Leviticus 19 is that you do not act xenophobic and kick people out because they look different and because they are from another country. No, rather you're supposed to assimilate them, and they come in understanding there are things they're going to have to learn and there are things they're going to have to do. They've got to obey a set of laws. They've got to do these certain things. And the way that they ultimately showed that is they would circumcise their families. That was the ultimate end of the naturalization process. If you didn't do that, you were restricted from so much of the community, and yet you were still expected to obey a lot of it. So it was like you were kind of a visa. You were on a visa kind of concept. So next was that and now the other principle on top of that of caring about the sojourner, helping them, caring about them, loving them, allowing them to become part of your system, which we could argue how America does that is broken or works or whatever. I'm not here to argue Americans' version. I'm just saying that there should be a pathway to becoming a Christian. That's how we would read this. You can't come hang out in the Christian community and not do the Christian things. We'll care
and get all
you.
the blessings from the Christian community and not.
Right. And so, again, I can't translate Israelite expectations of government onto American expectations of government. You just don't do that. You would translate that expectation onto the church. We would welcome people. We would care about them. We would expect them to assimilate to the Christian way of living. We would expect them then to assimilate to doing the things that we're doing as a Christian community. Now, that does include, according to Romans 13, obeying the laws of your land. So going out of the Israelite lands and entering into the Roman world, now the people are living, this is more like us. We're Christians living in a non-Christian society. And so while we have right to argue, and I would argue, hey, we need to do everything we can to make an easier pathway and get people in here. I think it's great that people want to come to the United States. I would love more people to come to the United States, and I'm not opposed to that. The situation that we have here, though, is that there are laws that our government has set up, and that we have to, as Christians, follow those as long as they don't keep you from preaching the gospel. It is those things that when you preach the gospel that are wrong, that we say, no, I can't do that. If they're forcing you to do something that is sinful, we say we wouldn't do that. So that's a difficulty. And so that is part of the one side of the argument. You have to square, how do we obey the laws of the land? How do we welcome the sojourner? How do we love our neighbors and love the church, then our neighbors and then our enemies? How do we do that appropriately? And then how do we make sure we're doing this all honoring everybody, even as the image of God? And then last, how do you uphold private property laws? Because one of the 10 commandments is you shall not steal. Well, that implies that there's ownership. And so this is critical because there is a large movement amongst young people that we want no borders. And I'm not saying that this is where you're at, but there is an argument that we should have no borders because we shouldn't have any borders. It's an open world. And that the problem is that violates the private property laws, the holdings laws of, like, you can't say you stole something. You can't actually set borders for the nations or the tribes, which Joshua is an entire bunch of boring chapters on all the boundaries. There are even laws that say you shall not move boundary markers. It's a very evil law. There were inheritance rights that were associated to boundaries, inheritance rights associated to private property. The Bible is full of private property and full of private property rights. And so the boundaries have to be understood. A government, a people's, has a right to draw a boundary. In fact, those wars are fought oftentimes because people cross boundaries. And so somehow we have to respect the private property aspect of a government to set its rules and its laws so it can love its people within its own borders appropriately.
And care appropriately.
So,
and one of the things I just want to jump in there.
Just some of the moral dilemmas that are all mixing together in this conversation.
And one of those things that you're talking about private property is we're talking about governments, right? And so one of the things to understand in all of this complex situation is the government is not a Christian government. It is a government. So, they have laws. They have established those laws as well. And so they choose who comes into the country, who doesn't come into the country. And again, they're not coming from it necessarily from a Christian perspective. They're coming from a government perspective. But again, whether you're talking government or you're talking personal property, you have the personal right to create your own boundaries on that to some degree. Who comes into your house, who doesn't come into your house. And again, there is a movement that is almost like no borders. You see it in Europe to some degree, and you see that movement trying to come into the United States as well. And the idea is we should just let everybody in. We have plenty and all that stuff. But again, the people that are saying those things, and again, this is not a firm position for us. We're just exploring different points of view. But people that are pushing for it, we shouldn't have boundaries. We should just let people in and then not kick them out or anything else. The other side of it is your personal property, right? Do you have locks on your doors? Do you only allow people to have free access to your house and your goods and your food and everything else? Only the people that you invite in, or is it just open to anybody that wants to come into your house? And so that is what you're seeing with the government argument here is some people want everybody just to be able to come in. And the government's saying, no, this is our house. We only want to let people in that we know are coming in. And again, if it's not just your personal house, if all of a sudden homeless started putting tents on your street and invading it, and now you feeling almost like you can't let your kids out of the house, would you be concerned with that? Or would you say, no, everybody has a right to just live where they want to live. We have an open street. I exaggerate, and I get that that's not necessarily fair, but it pushes. Yeah, because
I want to push back, like in the sense that, like, okay, this isn't. They're not talking about somebody they're talking about somebody who's been here, lived, followed the laws, been under the rules, all that stuff. And at that point, now is in jeopardy. And I think there is some honesty that you have to talk to yourself that you knew this was the consequence of coming when you came. And that's when we as Christians, the consequences come for what I made a choice. For example, if I'm going to go protest for this, like I'm saying this now, and I have to live with the consequences that I may be really hurting you and ticking you off. And that hurts me because I don't want to hurt you. It really feels like, wow, this stinks that I have to bring you bad news in some of the aspects of this. But at the same time, I want to remind us that our government has provided many things. We've treated most of these people as ourselves. Like we give them, in some cases, better access to health care than the average person. Education has been brought. There's a lot. The child is considered a citizen because they're born here. There's all these kind of aspects that our country has done a lot to say yes, welcome. Now I do think there is an anti-immigration movement, and what I mean by that is like we don't want people here. I'm not for that.
I'm not either.
I think that we should be a people who are inviting the world here so we can give them the gospel. I would love to see that happen. Better, it's easier. Let's bring them here, love them. Now, I do think that it should be done orderly. I think that the government has the right to do that. I don't think they have the right to hurt people in the process of doing that, in the sense of like physically harm them unless they're being threatened. Like they need to be able to do it peaceably and do it appropriately and these kinds of things. And I don't know what all the things that have been going on out there. And I know it's scary, and families are going to be torn apart. And that's the horrible reality is that, unfortunately, law enforcement's job is to tear families apart. And that's awful. Police officers, when they arrest somebody, tear a family apart. When they show up, when military shows up and has to arrest somebody, or the FBI arrests, there unfortunately consequences always a torn apart family. Somebody's going to jail, somebody's being separated from their loved ones.
And we're not talking just immigration. We're talking
any form of law enforcement.
Right.
And so I don't like that families are being torn apart. And I know that there's lots of conversation, and it's been in all the administrations, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, all the way since Reagan. There have been conversations like this, and maybe I don't know how old you are, but I can remember these conversations dating all the way back to Reagan about what do we do, and about families, and how do we keep families together, and you have children's in cages and all this kind of arguments over the years. And the bottom line is immigration is a horribly difficult and messy thing, and it's not right. The pathway is difficult. It's hard. It's not easy, and it's just a difficult thing. And I think the biggest thing is that you're in a really rough spot. And what we want to do is just let you know we be praying and But if you're asking for a pastor to step up and be like an activist on this stuff, I really can't be an activist because it's too complicated of a scenario, and I don't have all the facts. To be honest, I'm a guy who doesn't believe everything that I'm going to see on a news feed or on any form of internet. So I have a tendency to just deal with the ones that are right in my congregation, right around me. And so you're here, and if your dad's scared, it would be far more important that we're talking and caring and figuring out what's going on. Is there a pathway to citizenship? Is there a way to keep him? Is there a way to help him? Is that really a danger? Is it some, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I agree that people should not be calling those who have come here illegally. You have broken law when you come here and you didn't follow the natural pathway. That is truth, but you're not an illegal. That's not like what you are. We don't want to call somebody something for the action that has been done. That's not the case. So when it comes to your father, I really want to encourage you that hey, what is it the Lord's convicting him about? Is he here as a refugee? Is that something he should be talking about? There's a lot of stuff in here, and I don't know the specifics, and so I can't give you an appropriately nuanced argument for you. I can only lay out all of these things, and the implications are complex, and we can disagree as Christians. And so we need to understand, though, that we don't want to violate, we want to try to stay in the zone of these various moral things that I kind of laid out earlier.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I would just suggest too is, again, this is very emotionally charged, and the best thing that we could do as citizens, if we are not in favor of deporting people back to their country of origin when they have entered here illegally, overstayed their visas or whatever, is to get the laws changed, right? Because this is going to be a problem until the laws are changed. And so really call your congressmen, call your state senators, call your politicians, and
get involved in the parties.
Get them involved in moving a bill forward and being voted on. I will tell you, this is such a political mess. Nobody wants to touch it. I mean, they have talked about immigration reform since I remember. I graduated high school in 1980. It was a big push at that point. And it's like, okay, let's just give everybody amnesty and then we'll fix and we'll change the laws. And then
they didn't do
the amnesty happened and no laws got changed. And it just is constantly this battle between, okay, let's give everybody amnesty again, and we'll change the laws this time. And the other side's like, no, let's change the laws, then we'll deal with amnesty. And nobody wants to deal with the laws. And so really that is where true immigration reform is going to happen, is through the Senate and the House writing laws, passing laws to make things different and represent the people, and I'm not saying represent the aliens or representing the people that are anti-immigration. It is representing the people. What does the people want? Because that is really what it's going to come down to is, our vote and their vote. And because they're supposed to represent our interests. So, they should be making laws, passing laws, getting rid of laws that are no longer in our interest or that are in our interest. So politically is really the only way we're going to fix this situation. And it is so complicated.
Yeah, and there are, and you can get online, look up some of the groups that are advocating for the actual legal changes. You can work with them. You can talk with them. They will help. They will be able to help you out. There is a lot. I mean, what you don't want to get into is Marxist groups. Please just be aware that Marxist groups are using this as a wedge issue in a lot of places. And you're like, oh, that's a buzzword. As a Christian, Marxism is actually a Christian heresy, and I have to tell you that it is something that works against the church, and it fights the church a lot. It tries to use the scriptures against us, a lot of that stuff. Marxism knows what it's doing when it comes to this. Very educated, very, very good, very big worldview. Again, we're not. I believe the solution has to be a congressional solution. We have to fix the laws, and so we can protest all we want, we can scream and shout all we want, but until we put the pressure to bear on the actual congressman to change the laws and vote people in who are going to actually do that, we're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. And right now, I'll be praying that your family stays safe, and we are hurting for you guys, and we're sorry that this is the environment that you're finding yourself in.
And I would say that, changing the laws that represent the will of the people is paramount. And if the will of the people go against what I personally believe, then as being part of the society and a good citizen, I have to just go along with that and go, all right,
And we do that a lot.
Unless it's, yes, we do. Yes, we do. But the other side too is, I will say, really just look at truths that are going on and try to look at them objectively and try to understand both sides of the contention that is going on. I know a lot of times when we are emotionally charged or emotionally invested in something, it is hard for us to see the good of any side. And that is really what just sickens me about politics, is the fact that, when Obama was president and he did something good, the Republican Party could never say, oh, that was good. They always had to trash him whether he did something good. And then
vice versa.
And vice versa. When the Republicans are in power, the Democrats can never say something is good and we should agree with them. It's always like, no, we have to oppose them. That is the problem with politics. But again, when you are emotionally involved in something, and so again, when it comes to the immigration issue, I ran restaurants. I was a general manager for restaurants most of my life. And so I had busboys and cooks and stuff that were undocumented workers. And so when immigration issues came up politically, I was very sympathetic to their position, and so I do understand that aspect of being sympathetic toward a position when you are emotionally involved, and especially it's harder for you to see truth,
especially when it's family,
truth and consequences. So yeah, it's, I feel for you. It's not an easy, emotionally thing. And even
should bring it back up next week when Steven gets here, because he might have another angle on it. So okay. It's really good. So, but I hate to cut this off, but we do need to cut it. We're going long. And so I hope that for all of you out there who've been listening, that you got something out of that gobbledygook, but we're glad that you guys joined us today, and we pray that God would bless you and that you have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time here on The Rabbit Trail.
Yes, boom, shakalaka.